of a particular frequency. And so the manifestation of the spiritual levels and other beings, forces, and then the structures that manifest from the original pattern, which is spiritual, into the structures in the physical world. So things that we're taught in sacred geometry about pure archetypal structure, like what the Greeks taught with the Platonic solids, the octahedron, dodecahedron, etc., they actually manifest as physical structures in things like the mineral realm. And you can see the stones that have that structure. But the key thing for the Rosicrucians is that these patterns, everything in the world comes directly from the One, from the mind of God. And then to be able to actually discern the different qualities and functions of things in the manifest world, including things like the different spiritual beings that everyone is connected to all the time, and to become conscious of those and how they affect us, there would be teachings hidden within geometric glyphs. Because again, the geometric glyph holds pure pattern information. It's a packed thought form from the mind of God of a pure pattern. So the tree of life holds a tremendous amount of embedded information. In some of our previous talks and workshops, some of you have been with us when we described the way that there are 22 paths connecting the 10 spheres on the tree of life. And those in the classical Kabbalah are described as being related to a pattern of 3, 7, and 12. We're not getting into that part of it tonight. It's tangential to what we're discussing. But just to hook it up for those of you that have been with us before, that's an aspect that's within the tree of life that actually shows us the coding pattern of anchors for energy in the human body, for the human consciousness within 3 points of the astral body, for the human life body within 7 points, and then for the human physical body within 12 locations. Just as in Chinese medicine, it's described there are 12 primary meridians. So these numbers are related to functions and the pattern from the mind of God. A huge amount is embedded in these, and different teachers can focus on completely different things from the same pattern, because it's holographic. It's like a jewel, and different facets of all these different things. So if we take a look at what we're looking at tonight, there's another pattern that's laid within the tree of life, which is that it has 3 different pillars inside of it. Now the 3 pillars have an interesting quality to them. On the left and the right hand pillars, which are sometimes referred to in the West as the pillars of mercy and severity, they don't go all the way up or all the way down. The only one that goes all the way up and all the way down is the central, or the middle pillar. And this is related to a very deep teaching of how to discern 3 different types of spiritual forces, or actually 3 different types of spiritual beings in the classical tradition. Now, unfortunately, this idea of discerning 3 different types of spiritual beings was primarily lost over time, so that in most external Western churches today, it's not taught anymore, unfortunately, because it was in the original tradition. And instead, things are presented only as like, there's the good spiritual beings and the bad spiritual beings. Well, the problem is, as we are created from the Godhead, the first movement from the one is into the two. It's like the first split of the egg in the mother's womb to be the 2 different parts that will then split to become the full manifest human being. So that split into 2 is actually taking the unified aspect of the Godhead, the one, and moving into 2 opposite polarities. In the Indian tradition, they talk about this being Shiva and Shakti, these archetypal yin and yang, masculine and feminine aspects. Now this is absolutely critical, because you can't say that one is good and one is bad. You can't have a purely polarized system and say that's good, that's bad. If we have male and female, which one's good and which one's bad? But this type of thinking infects everything in the Western world today, like our politics. Well, if this side is right, that side must be wrong, sort of thing. Everything is brought into this polarized dichotomy. But the original understanding was much different. If we study classical teachings like in Tibetan Buddhism, they talk about, the path of development is not to one extreme or another. It's the middle way. It's that central path, holding a balance between 2 different extremes. And so the same thing is true on the tree of life. We have a middle path, just like the Tibetans talk about, and then things can go off balance to one extreme or another. Do you want to be too hot or too cold? You don't want either, you want to be in the middle. But this applies to everything within spiritual development. So again, we could talk a lot about this, but I want to give you the direct application of it now as a building block toward the overall concept of Rosicrucian initiation. So one of the things that needs to be discerned with this concept of the Godhead creating the world and the different levels of manifest being that are referred to in the classical text is that there are beings that connect to the middle pillar. They go all the way up and all the way down. That means they connect to the highest levels of the Godhead, and they also connect all the way down to the level of the manifest creation. In the Western tradition, within esoteric Christianity, this is connected to the Christ or Christic beings, or within the monotheistic traditions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they refer to them as Michaelic beings, because Michael is considered to be the highest of the archangels. And so one of the names that is attributed to the term Michael is that the name Mikael means who is as God. And so that idea that Michael holds the quality of the Godhead, but reduced in scale to where it can be interacted with at an archangelic level. The meaning of this is that when we hold to the middle way, perfect balance in all polarities in life, then we're on the path that takes us all the way. But through free will, through the mysteries that are described in the book of Genesis and in the Kabbalah and many other traditions, where through the exercise of free will, we can choose to go off to one direction or the other and get off balance. The same thing is true for certain types of higher spiritual beings who actually have the spiritual task of being somewhat polarized and pulling us one direction or another. Now, the way that this got confused for the modern Western tradition is that some of the terms used in ancient times got to be confused together, so they could no longer differentiate their meaning, which leads to a lot of confusion. So toward one hand, toward the left-hand pillar, you have spiritual beings that don't understand or really care for the physical world. They're not into that. The physical world is something that seems like a place of suffering. And many of the ancient traditions of the world were heavily influenced by these beings, with teachings of the physical world being an illusion, of the physical world being a place of suffering, get off the cycle of karma and reincarnation, etc. In the Western world, it was understood that these spiritual beings are advanced spiritual beings, more advanced than human beings. And they also have tremendous spiritual light. When one encounters them, one does not encounter a being of darkness. One encounters a being of tremendous light. And so the name given to the leader of this particular spiritual group was Lucifer, and these are Luciferic beings. Now, in most traditions today, this is completely confused because the term Lucifer is completely mixed up with the term Ha-Satan, or Satan, which is a dark being. And so all differentiation is lost. But the Luciferic beings were understood as beings of great spiritual light, but who do not completely understand physical reality or the process of human evolution in the physical world. To them, it seems like we're children being tortured in a place we don't need to be, so get off the cycle and go back to spirit. Again, this is a very deep topic, talking about the consciousness and activities of these beings, and it's made doubly difficult because there's so much baggage attached to the names today that are not part of the original tradition. But that basic idea here is that to one side, you can go, even with any human being, toward a type of spiritual development where you really focus on spirit, but your physical life goes straight to hell. You know, you're not able to pay the bills, and your relationships with people suffer, and you're not taking care of business, and your life's not going that well, but you're really focused on spirit all the time, but not grounded. Now that can also lead, unfortunately, to forms of spirituality that are illusory or hallucinogenic, so that the things that are being perceived and worked with are not really real, or they're distorted through our lens in a particular way that's really not helpful. And so this is connected to what classically is referred to as the Luciferic extreme. Now, on the other hand, as you might imagine, it's the exact opposite polarity. If one is connecting to spirit, but not really following the full process of creation in matter and connecting to that, then the other is going to be deeply connected to matter. It's going to be deeply connected to the process of linking onto the physical materialization process and loving physicality. The first identification of these beings in ancient texts was really in the old Persian Zoroastrian tradition. And in the Persian Zoroastrian tradition, they referred to these beings as Angramenu or Ahriman. Could you let the person in the door? Now, this being of Ahriman or Angramenu in the old Persian Zoroastrian text was contrasted to a being that was related to the being of the sun. The name was given as Ahura Mazda. And for the old Persian Zoroastrians, they said that this is the spiritual being that you can spiritually perceive clairvoyantly in the aura of the sun. And this is the same concept we have of the sun god that then later becomes the manifested concept of the solar logos in the later Western tradition. The spiritual being directly related to the sun. So it's opposed by this dark being of materiality. So human beings can fall into this